I never wanted to be famous. I just wanted to build something of my own, something that didn't belong to a corporation, a manager, or a quarterly performance review. By day, I was a junior systems architect at a mid-sized tech firm in San Diego. By night, I was pouring my soul into an idea I couldn't stop thinking about. A streamlined AI tool that could automate compliance reports for small businesses in regulated industries. Nothing flashy. Nothing viral. Just something useful. I'd been working on the prototype for 6 months. Coding during lunch breaks. Sketching the UI in notebooks during staff meetings. I registered a domain, bought a GitHub Copilot license, even filed a draft for a provisional patent under a shell name, just to be safe. But I was still young. Still naive. Still believed that sometimes the people above you might actually want to help you rise. That's where Rick Landers came in, my boss. Charismatic. Always just back from a conference. He'd give these speeches about how we foster innovation, how anyone with a good idea can change this company from the inside out. So one Friday afternoon, after a long coding sprint and a little too much caffeine, I mentioned the idea in passing. Not in a pitch way, just a hey, here's something I've been noodling with kind of way. He looked up from his phone, smiled, asked a few questions that seemed genuinely curious. Then he said, "You ever think of bringing something like that in-house?" I laughed, said I wasn't sure. He nodded slowly, gave me that mentor look and said, "We should talk more about it." I didn't know then, but that was the moment it started. The moment the thief saw the blueprint. And the moment I stopped being an employee and started playing chess. I didn't expect fireworks after that conversation with Rick. I didn't even follow up. I figured maybe, just maybe, he'd circle back in a week or two. But on Monday morning something was off. I walked into our 9 a.m. strategy meeting and saw a pitch deck up on the projector. The title slide. Project Titan. Revolutionizing Regulatory Automation. My stomach dropped. The name was different, but the description, the features, the pain points, the proposed roadmap, it was my idea. My architecture. My work. Rick was already at the front of the room, sleeves rolled up, grinning like a startup founder on demo day. "We've been working on something exciting behind the scenes," he said smoothly. "It's still early, but I think this could be our next major growth pillar." He clicked through slide after slide, almost all of them exact clones of the diagrams I'd sketched on my tablet. The UI mockup, identical right down to the compliance tagging flow I designed 2 weeks ago. I kept waiting for him to credit me. To say, "Of course, this came from one of our own brilliant devs." Nothing. Not a glance. Not a mention. I was invisible. And the worst part. People loved it. The VP of engineering asked how soon we could build a beta. Marketing took notes like it was gospel. Even the CEO nodded slowly and said, "This is the kind of initiative I like to see, Rick." That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, replaying the meeting in my head on a loop. Was I overreacting? Maybe it was just parallel thinking. Well, I knew better. The codebase he used for his mockup. It was lifted straight from the sandbox repo I left on the company server. I checked the timestamps. He cloned it over the weekend. That's when the rage started to fade, and something colder took over. See, what Rick didn't know was that the version he had, it was incomplete. There was a vulnerability buried in the reporting module. Harmless under most conditions, but disastrous if used at scale. And he also didn't know about the private LLC I'd registered. Or the provisional patent I filed under that name 3 weeks ago. He thought he'd stolen gold. He didn't know he'd picked up a live grenade. By Wednesday, the office was buzzing about Project Titan. People who hadn't spoken to me in months suddenly wanted to collaborate. Slack threads filled with vague applause emojis and comments like, "Love the initiative." And "Rick's really putting us on the map." I watched it all unfold silently. Meanwhile, Rick started turning up the charm in my direction, but not in a way that acknowledged what he did. No, this was pure manipulation. He invited me to coffee, dropped lines like, "You're such a valuable part of this team," and most infuriatingly, "I'd love for you to shadow some of the leadership meetings coming up." Shadow. Like I was an intern. Like I didn't build the foundation he was now dancing on. And then came the ultimate insult. Friday I got pulled into a meeting with Rick in HR. At first, I thought it was about giving me some official credit, or maybe a bonus tied to Titan's early-stage success. But instead Rick turned the conversation. "I've noticed some behavioral issues," he began. "Lack of collaboration, isolating from the team. A bit of a trust issue. We need to realign." Realign. He was painting me as difficult, moody, uncooperative. He even implied I might have been hoarding side projects that should have been brought to the company sooner. I looked at the HR manager. She wasn't making eye contact. That's when I knew. He was trying to box me out before I made any noise. Rick didn't just steal my idea. He was building an alibi. If I said anything, it would look like I was being petty or retaliatory. But he still didn't know one thing. The trap was already set. See, a few weeks back when I was working on that early build, I embedded a unique code string in the sandbox framework. An innocuous-looking comment buried deep in the module's logic. That string was linked to a timestamp submission in the USPTO's provisional patent system. It wasn't just proof. It was a landmine, legal, digital, and public. And I hadn't triggered it yet. Because I was waiting. For the moment it would hurt the most. If Rick was going to parade around with my idea, then fine. I'd let him. In fact, I decided to help him make it even bigger. That next Monday, I sent him a private message. "Hey Rick. I know Titan's really important to you. I've been thinking about it more. Happy to offer feedback on the architecture if that's helpful. Let me know." It was bait. And he took it without hesitation. "Absolutely," he replied within minutes. "I'd love for you to be more involved. You were one of the sharpest engineers I've worked with." Classic. He thought he was reeling me back in. In truth, I was walking him into the deep end. Over the next week, I volunteered little insights here and there. Suggestions on scaling. Code snippets that solved some of the bugs he was clearly struggling with behind the scenes. Fake beta timeline projection. I even drafted a mock data analytics dashboard that looked good, but underneath had deeply flawed logic that would break under real-world pressure. He was thrilled. Every time I gave him something, he ran off with it like a kid on Christmas morning. Meanwhile, I set up a meeting with someone outside the company. Her name was Lisa, a tech journalist I'd met months ago at a startup expo. Back then, she was covering funding rounds, patent conflicts, and corporate IP theft in Silicon Valley. I sent her an email with a simple subject line. A stealth founder just had her startup stolen by her boss. Inside, I laid it all out. The patent filing, the code string fingerprint, the original proposal drafts I had emailed myself before the repo ever existed. I even attached Slack screenshots with timestamps. It wasn't just revenge. It was airtight. She responded within 2 hours. "This is gold. Can we talk off the record?" While Rick basked in his fake spotlight, I gave Lisa the full background over encrypted calls. She started digging, verifying, and quietly prepping a feature story. But the real trigger came from a different angle. Rick wanted to pitch Titan to investors. He figured the company's internal success gave him enough leverage to request a funding demo through one of our executive partners. Perfect. I encouraged him, gave him presentation notes, suggested a flashy tech demo that would wow the VCs. And I made sure that demo would fail. In a very specific way. Because the version of the product I helped him build. It was designed to crash, right at the point where investor questions would be at their peak. All I had to do now was wait. Demo day arrived like a storm front, buzzing energy, executive faces, and over-caffeinated optimism. Rick wore his best blue suit, pacing the conference room like a TED speaker waiting for the applause. Everyone was there. VPs, department heads, a few junior developers he never remembered the names of, and 2 venture capitalists from a major fund who'd heard good things about Titan. I sat in the back, quiet, laptop open, sipping my coffee. I'd rigged the demo so it would work. But only until a certain feature was triggered. It was a feature I knew any decent investor would ask about. Rick started confidently. This project came together in record time thanks to some incredible work from the team, he said, making brief eye contact with me like we shared some secret. Today, I'll walk you through Titan's performance model and live data simulation. Slide after slide, he sold them the future. Buzzwords. Shiny animations that looked expensive. Everyone nodded along. Then came the live demo. He launched the build on screen. At first it was smooth, input tracking, workflow logic, visual outputs. The room hummed with approval. And then one of the VCs leaned in. Can you run a recursive task through your anomaly detection layer? I want to see how it handles unexpected parameters in a live environment. That was the moment. Rick, smug and unfazed, clicked through confidently. Of course. The software hesitated. Then the error logs started spilling. Red flags. Memory dump spikes. The simulation froze. The projector went black. Rick chuckled awkwardly. Just a little hiccup. But the system crashed. Fully. Hard. The lead investor leaned back, eyebrow raised. Did you stress test this at all? Rick looked around, panic starting to seep through his carefully styled hair. He glanced at me. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just closed my laptop and left the room. Within hours, the internal Slack lit up. Some devs were asking, what happened to the server? Who built that part of the code? Rumors started flying about unstable architecture and backdoor loops. But Rick, he tried to blame QA. That was his final mistake. Because the next day, Lisa's article dropped. Startup sabotage. The silent engineer who outsmarted her boss. It laid everything out. Rick's theft, the manipulated demo, the legal fingerprint buried in the code, and the verified patent filing made under my name, months earlier. And with that, the house of cards collapsed. The company was blindsided. The investors pulled interest. Rick was relieved of his duties. But I wasn't done yet. Because I had already filed for incorporation. Under a new name. And now, Titan was being rebuilt, from the ashes he helped burn. By me. The day Rick was fired, I received 2 emails and a phone call. One email was from the company's legal department, politely requesting a conversation regarding intellectual property concerns. I forwarded it to my lawyer. The second was from Lisa. You good? Because they're definitely not. And the phone call. It was from one of the VCs who witnessed the crash. He wasn't calling to scold me. He was calling to schedule a meeting. I've read the article, he said. And you're filing. You're clearly the brain behind this product. I didn't pretend to be surprised. I'd anticipated the backlash and the opportunity. That's what the trap was for. Humiliation followed by exposure, followed by leverage. Within 48 hours, I was sitting across from both investors in a quiet cafe, pitching the real Titan. Not the Frankenstein version Rick pieced together. We're rebuilding the core engine with scalable architecture, I told them. The actual version uses modular machine learning loops that Rick never understood. What he stole was the shell, not the soul. They were impressed. And more importantly, they were pissed at him. They offered seed funding within the week. No nonsense. No red tape. Just clean capital and 2 clauses. Full control to me, and a non-negotiable NDA regarding the prior employer. I agreed. And Titan was reborn. This time under a new name. Nova Core Systems. I hired a small team, people I trusted from the old company, ones who knew what had happened and respected how I handled it. I didn't want vengeance at every turn. I wanted quiet power. We worked out of a co-working space in the city, living off ramen and midnight code sprints. But every line we pushed was cleaner, smarter, and ours. 6 months in, we landed a contract with a logistics firm looking to automate anomaly detection in their supply chain. The beta worked flawlessly. Rick's name never came up. But I knew he was watching. The article had gone viral. People in the tech scene whispered about it. The engineer who flipped the script. Job boards were full of memes. One read, "Don't rick your startup. Hire smarter." Made me laugh. Not because it was clever, because it meant I'd finally escaped the shadow of being someone's employee. I was no longer a pawn in someone else's ambition. I was the architect. And Rick, he became a warning, parable, lesson. And just like that, NovaCore got its first press feature. This time not as revenge, but as a revolution. 6 months after NovaCore's official launch, we weren't just surviving, we were setting the pace. Our anomaly detection engine was light years ahead of the competition. Every week brought a new inquiry. From healthcare logistics to predictive analytics in aerospace, everyone suddenly wanted to talk. But none of that compared to what came in one cold Thursday afternoon. A message from a university professor. He'd read Lisa's article. Turns out, he taught startup ethics and wanted to include my story in a course titled Innovation and Integrity. Case study. It was surreal, but it made me realize something. This wasn't just a revenge story anymore. This was about rewriting the narrative, mine and every overlooked builder's. So I leaned in. I agreed to speak at a panel, then a podcast, then another. People started recognizing my name. Women from tech circles DM'd me daily. How did you stay calm? How did you protect your work? How did you not burn the whole thing down? My answer was always the same. Because I wasn't there to destroy. I was there to build. NovaCore wasn't just a startup anymore, it was a platform. I began mentoring quietly. Started a Slack group for female engineers dealing with IP theft and silent sabotage. Shared every strategy one had used. Some people said I was inspiring. Some said I was dangerous. I took both as compliments. Meanwhile, Rick's name occasionally resurfaced in news blurbs. He tried launching a podcast consulting a second-rate AI startup. But the industry had a long memory, and a longer trail of LinkedIn posts mocking him. One of them quoted me directly. "If you're going to steal fire, make sure it doesn't burn you." That one went viral. But even as the attention grew, I kept my focus grounded. We reinvested revenue into building better tools. I hired interns who'd been passed over. I sent one of our engineers, who was once told she wasn't technical enough, to speak at a national summit. She nailed it. In quiet moments, I'd remember that room, demo day. The crashing screen. Rick's stammering excuses. And I'd smile. Because this wasn't just justice. This was legacy. And legacy doesn't scream. Builds. Silently. Powerfully. Permanently. 3 months into our rapid growth, I received an envelope. Not an email, not a call, but a physical, certified envelope. From Rick's former legal team. Inside, a settlement offer. Apparently, Rick was being quietly sued by a group of former investors over fraudulent misrepresentation. They had subpoenaed company documents and, thanks to a few breadcrumbs I'd left, my name surfaced again. The letter read, "Mr. R. Sloan is prepared to offer a settlement for your cooperation and to avoid further reputational damage. A non-disclosure agreement will be required." The number on the check. $750,000. I didn't need the money. NovaCore had just closed a $2.8 million funding round. We were thriving. But it wasn't about money anymore. It was about message. So I called my lawyer and said, "We'll accept, but we're rewriting the NDA." And that's exactly what we did. The agreement protected trade secrets, yes, but also guaranteed one very specific clause. I could legally tell my story as long as I never used Rick's full name or former company's name. I signed it, deposited the check, and then I put that money to use in the most strategic way possible. I launched the Vault, an encrypted online platform designed to help creators, engineers, and entrepreneurs safeguard their early-stage ideas with time-stamped version tracking, peer review protocols, and even a free legal advice feature. Think GitHub meets a digital notary. Built for people who've been burned before. Within weeks, we had our first 1,000 users. 1 month later, 10,000. The Vault didn't just give people protection. It gave them power. The kind I once wished I had. Back when I sat in Rick's office being patronized while he downloaded my future behind my back. Irony. The original seed money for this empire, this fortress I was building for others, came from Rick himself. Or rather, from the settlement meant to keep me quiet. I didn't burn the bridge. I bought the damn river. And I built a fortress on its banks, where no one else would ever drown like I almost did. It was a normal Monday morning. The office was buzzing. 2 new interns, a product team stand-up, and a podcast crew in the conference room prepping for a story on tech founders under 30. I was in my glass-walled office going over an acquisition proposal when Claire, our operations lead, buzzed in. "Hey, there's a guy in reception. He says he doesn't have an appointment but he asked for you. By name." I almost brushed it off. Until she added, "He said it's Rick." I didn't flinch. Not anymore. I stood, adjusted my blazer and walked out, just like any other meeting. There he was. Same pressed shirt. Same rehearsed smile. But this time, no gatekeepers, no boardroom, no stolen code in his back pocket. Just a man who had fallen from tech media darling to footnote in less than a year. He stood to shake my hand. I didn't extend mine. "What brings you here, Rick?" "Can we talk?" he said. "Just 5 minutes. I'm not here to fight." I gestured to an empty breakout room. Glass walls, full visibility. He sat across from me and cleared his throat. He looked thinner, older. Like a man who had bet the farm and lost the land. "I just wanted to say I underestimated you." I said nothing. "I thought you were another bright idea in my orbit. Something I could reshape." Still nothing. He fumbled. "Novacore is everywhere now. Your name's in articles. In panels. You built something good." I let him speak. It wasn't guilt or remorse. It was recognition. The kind you give someone after realizing they were never beneath you. You were just too blind to look sideways. Finally I asked, "What do you want from me?" He paused. "A chance. Knee roll. Could consult. Advice. I've got experience." That was it. He came for a job. The same man who tried to bury me under NDAs and NDA violations was now asking to work for the company I built from the ashes of his sabotage. I leaned back and said calmly, "You're welcome to apply, like anyone else." He blinked. "Is that a no?" Understood. "It's a process, Rick. We believe in transparency and merit here. You'll be evaluated. The same way I never was." Open the door. He got the message. As he left, I turned to Claire. "Make sure HR sees his application, if he actually submits one. But make a note. He'll be reviewed by our youngest team leads." He grinned. Full circle. This wasn't revenge by fire. This was power served cold, with protocols and policies he never thought I could create. He left my world quietly. Exactly how I entered his. A week after Rick showed up, something unexpected arrived in my inbox. Not from a VC. Not from a journalist. It was a handwritten letter scanned into a PDF. Sent through the Contact Us form on the Vault's website. The sender. A 17-year-old girl from Illinois. No LinkedIn. No blog. Just a short message with the subject line. "You made me believe again." Opened it. "Dear Novacore founder. You don't know me. My name's Tara. I'm still in high school but I watched what you did. Not just the company you built but the story behind it. My brother used to say I was too much for tech. Too idealistic. Too stubborn. When I built a prototype for a menstrual health tracker that worked without internet, because not everyone in the world has stable Wi-Fi, he laughed. Said it wouldn't scale. I almost deleted the files. Then I found your interview. You said, if someone tries to silence you with doubt, remember that's all they have, noise. That line. That one sentence. I printed it. It's on my bedroom wall now. I applied to MIT last month. And I'm still working on the tracker. I even saved it to the vault. So, thank you. For proving that quiet power is still power. And that revenge doesn't have to be loud to be complete. You made me believe again. Tara A. I reread it twice. Then I sat back in my chair and stared at the city skyline outside our glass-paneled office. That letter meant more than any article. More than the funding. More than Rick's $750,000 check. Because it meant that this wasn't just a story of revenge anymore. It had become a ripple. Proof that someone watching from the sidelines, someone who might have been me 10 years ago, now saw a path forward. One that didn't start in a boardroom or a college dorm, but in being underestimated and choosing to rise anyway. We hung Tara's words in our office near the dev board. And at the next company town hall, I read them out loud. Not as a victory lap, but as a reminder. Every trap I left behind didn't just expose a thief. It protected the next generation of builders. And made sure someone like Rick could never do it again. That was the real legacy. It was 6:45 a.m. when my phone buzzed with a string of congratulatory texts. You made the cover. Page 12 quote. Legendary. Rick's probably throwing his espresso at the wall iron face with tears of joy. I hadn't seen it yet. I walked to the lobby of our office building, still half asleep, hair tied back, hoodie on, and the receptionist grinned before sliding a crisp issue of Innovate Tech Monthly across the desk. There it was. My face. Full cover. Headline in bold gold. The one who outbuilt the boys. Below that, a subhead. How Novacore's quiet founder disrupted a $4 billion industry. After her boss tried to erase her. I stood frozen for a moment. Because this wasn't just a tech magazine. It was Rick's dream. He'd submitted his profile for this feature every single year we worked together. Pitched it. Emailed editors. Bought ad space. Always denied. And now, I didn't even pitch them. They reached out to me. I flipped through the pages. The article wasn't fluff. It told the whole story. Cleverly, legally, subtly. It mentioned a male executive who used to pass off her prototypes as his own, without naming Rick. It quoted anonymous former co-workers who said, she was always 3 steps ahead. Just quiet about it. The closing paragraph. In an industry obsessed with disruption, it turns out the most dangerous innovation is remembering everything they tried to forget and building from it. It was 6:45 a.m. when my phone buzzed with a string of congratulatory texts. You made the cover. Page 12 quote. Legendary. Rick's probably throwing his espresso at the wall iron face with tears of joy. I hadn't seen it yet. I walked to the lobby of our office building, still half asleep, hair tied back, hoodie on, and the receptionist grinned before sliding a crisp issue of Innovate Tech Monthly across the desk. There it was. My face. Full cover. Headline in bold gold. The one who outbuilt the boys. Below that, a subhead. How Novacore's quiet founder disrupted a $4 billion industry. After her boss tried to erase her. I stood frozen for a moment. Because this wasn't just a tech magazine. It was Rick's dream. He'd submitted his profile for this feature every single year we worked together. Pitched it. Emailed editors. Bought ad space. Always denied. And now, I didn't even pitch them. They reached out to me. I flipped through the pages. The article wasn't fluff. It told the whole story. Cleverly, legally, subtly. It mentioned a male executive who used to pass off her prototypes as his own, without naming Rick. It quoted anonymous former co-workers who said, she was always 3 steps ahead. Just quiet about it. The closing paragraph. In an industry obsessed with disruption, it turns out the most dangerous innovation is remembering everything they tried to forget and building from it. Months passed. Novacore grew faster than I expected. New hires, international partners, investors now reaching out to us. But somewhere inside, I knew there was still one last move to make. Not out of spite, not out of ego, but for closure. You see, the original prototype I showed Rick back at INX, the one he copied, pitched, and tried to claim, that wasn't the final version. It was intentionally incomplete. When I handed him that early build, I left behind one specific function, hidden deep in the back end, obscured beneath layers of clean code. I named it Silent Echo 47. It didn't do anything malicious. No sabotage, no viruses. That's not how I play. It simply pinged a private endpoint on my personal server every time a user opened the clone app that Rick eventually launched under a different brand. Why? 'Cause I needed to know. I needed to see how many users were misled by his stolen version, how many investors downloaded it, how many teams demoed it, and how many bugs they encountered because of what Rick didn't understand about the tech. And for 6 months, the numbers flowed in. Then it flatlined. The pings stopped. A week later, TechCrunch broke the story. Upstart platform Brilliance AI shuts down operations after major security vulnerabilities surface. CEO Rick Morrison declines to comment. I sat alone in my apartment that night. No champagne. No celebration. Just me, a laptop, and a blinking terminal that now read. Silent Echo 47.log, connection terminated. Closed it. And finally, I let it all go. Not because Rick had failed, but because I had won on my own terms. With grace. With strategy. With patience. Most people think revenge is loud, explosive, seen. But this was chess. I let him play his game. Watched him rewrite the rules. Then calmly made the last move. By following the ones he never saw coming. Now, Novacore isn't just a company. It's a warning. To anyone who thinks stealing from the quiet one means they'll stay silent. To anyone who confuses modesty with weakness. To every future Rick, who believes they can take credit for someone else's light without ever casting their own shadow. Because now we leave a legacy not just in patents or IPOs, but in traps that never needed to trigger. And the knowledge that we outbuilt them anyway.